Welcome to the Jericho Experiment for our highly anticipated show on the Lost Book of Enki, Memoirs and Prophecies of an Extraterrestrial God. This is Jericho Walls here with Chet O'Dale, and we're excited to get our show started. The Lost Book of Enki reveals a story that has strongly resonated with me.
Jericho, what's up, buddy?
What's up, man?
Man, I love this book. I have read it multiple times. You know, I know you have too. But what is it about this book that just resonates with you so strongly?
You know, it just seems like it makes more sense to me. It's the way the tablets explain the stories that we have heard all of our lives. The story of creation, the deluge, and the Tower of Babel. It's just a, more believable view in my eyes. And I just feel a strong connection with it.
Okay. I can agree with that. But before we get started, let's talk about a few things. We both know Sitchin has been highly discredited for a lot of his writings. But you and I, we're not here to dispute any of that. We're not here to argue, in his favor or to prove this book, true or false.
Why is that though? Why would Sitchin be discredited for this book?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of interviews and articles on him. You can Google it and find it, and the argument is that he really wasn't, trained in this field, which a lot of these people, refer to as pseudoscience.
What exactly does that mean?
Basically, it means that it hasn't or it can't be proven in the field, which I think is pretty arrogant for them to say that.
Well, this story contains writings from the ancient Sumerian cuneiform tablets, other ancient texts, including the Bible.
Yeah, it just seems like people are trying to discredit Sitchin and think of him as just some amateur that was simply interested in the subject of ancient aliens.
Right. Well, this discussion is not to prove or disprove any of Sitchin's writings.
Not at all.
We're simply here to discuss the book, the alternate views from the Bible, and discuss the thought-provoking ideas presented in this book.
And what do you mean by alternate views from the Bible? Like the story of creation?
Well, let's say that you never really understood the stories in the Bible. Sitchin translated stories from ancient texts that talk about the same stories, just with different characters and different reasons why the events took place.
Well, Jericho, you introduced me to this book, and I'm really glad you did. But again, one more time, let's just make it clear, we're not trying to make anyone believe this book is fact or fiction. It's just a book that brings up certain things, for me, that just make a lot more sense than what I was brought up to believe.
Exactly.
I mean, I was raised in a very rigid religious home.
Me too.
I went to Catholic school for many years, and then my mom started dragging me, to the Southern Baptist Church every Sunday morning for, all the way through high school.
It was the same for me with my dad. He was a staunch Southern Baptist Christian, which meant that I was too.
And so was I.
I mean, I was in church every Sunday. I went to Sunday school and youth group.
Yeah. Church was a big part of my life. Where we grew up, church was a big part of every kid's life.
I was even headed down the path of becoming a preacher.
Dude, I remember that. What made you want to be a preacher?
I just felt there was a need to save others. But what I found, I was really in need of saving myself. And I do believe that the Bible contains a lot of useful and great information that we should all know.
I agree. I just think a lot of people take every word in the Bible literally when it was never meant to be taken that way.
I can agree with that. Again, I'm not saying everyone has to agree with me. I'm just giving my own personal opinion on how I feel about it.
So, for me, I was never able to make sense of what we learned in church.
Me either. A lot of lessons, and especially the stories, just never seem right or even conceivable.
Yeah, I would ask, a lot of questions. And looking back, they were some pretty intelligent questions for a kid. But I was always told that we are just not to question anything in the Bible.
Yep. We're just, supposed to believe it.
And that made even less sense to me. And my questions were always met with the same answer. Chat, you just have to believe. And, I was made to feel like there was just something wrong with me. Like, because, I couldn't make sense of it, I was doomed to hell. Or, I was some kind of outcast, just because I questioned the teachings.
I agree. While many things never made sense to me, I really just tried to push through and believe. I was made to think I had to ignore my questions and just fall in line with the rest of the flock. But when I read this book, The Lost Book of Enki, I thought to myself, wow, now this one makes sense. And I really believe that a lot of my questions were revealed in a much different and more realistic way, than from what I was taught in church as a kid. So let's talk about this book.
All right. Well, we're going to talk about the 14 tablets. I'm just going to read this, right from the book. The words from Indubsar, Master Scribe, son of Eridu City, servant of the Lord Enki, great God. And so what we're going to see is this is a memoir about a race of extraterrestrial beings and their motivation for being a part of the celestial space sagas, which sounds really cool, doesn't it?
It really does.
Like super exciting, you know? And, you know, their motivation may have been directly related to emotions, rivalries, and morals, or the lack of morals.
And we're going to learn about the relationships they had on another planet called Nibiru.
Now, Jericho, why didn't we ever hear about this planet Nibiru in school?
What if Nibiru is this mysterious Planet X we've heard so much about?
Yeah, I have seen so many tabloids with the mysterious Planet X on the cover.
I remember that as well. We're going to learn about the conflicts between the Anunnaki on planet Nibiru and planet Earth, and that the events, the who, what, when, where, and whys about the beginning of civilization were taken from an eyewitness account.
And what do you think about these accounts, Jericho? And how far back do you think these accounts go?
Well, think about Mesopotamia and the Sumerian people. You know, they were taking records on everything that happened an entire millennia ago. There were recipes, music, medicine. It was an entire civilization starter kit.
And don't forget, they wrote that they obtained their knowledge from past events.
Like the story of creation.
Like the Garden of Eden, the Great Deluge.
And the Tower of Babel. All stories from a time before civilizations or mankind, as we know it, even began.
And this knowledge came from a race of people called the Anunnaki, which Sitchin translates as those who from heaven to earth came, which is a pretty interesting thought. Honestly, before reading this book, I had never heard of anyone called an Anunnaki.
Well, this is where controversy begins. And if you really think about it, it's not controversial at all. Just a different perspective.
Yes, we are here to talk about a different perspective, or look, if you will, on past events that were recorded by ancient civilizations.
And these records, they were lost or hidden thousands and thousands of years ago.
This is where we also see a different version of tales from the Bible.
And maybe this version may seem a little more realistic to many people.
Well, especially if you're someone like me, right? Someone that just never got the stories we were taught in Sunday school and church.
I mean, the Bible says that we came from Adam and Eve. And they have two sons, Cain and Abel.
So how did they reproduce? I mean, just think about that for a second.
And the Bible even tells us that Cain, was banished to the land of Nod where he took a wife.
So how does that make any sense?
Exactly. How were there people in another land if Adam and Eve were the only other two people?
I don't know, man. But the Lost Book of Enki does have an explanation for this. And who these people were and how they got there, and why they were in a land far away. And even Harari in his book Sapiens, he told us that we had many cousins. We were not the only human species on this planet.
Right. We had uncivilized cousins and even brothers and sisters.
All roaming the earth at the same time.
And that just makes so much more sense. I think we all believe that, we had to have been created by something.
Whether we believe it's evolution or some great architect or one prime source. But the idea that we may have been created by extraterrestrial species might seem insane.
But the book really is pointing to the idea that extraterrestrial beings modified the DNA of an existing species here on Earth.
Yeah. And then they mixed that DNA with their DNA to bring consciousness to these species.
So basically an upgrade.
And this is where things start to get interesting.
Could we have been created by an ancient alien race? If so, what for?
I mean, these aliens would have had to come a long way to get here. Why in the world would they come here just to advance an earthling species?
Yeah, or bring consciousness to this ape-like species.
Well, Sitchin gives us a very interesting hypothesis.
In the book, The Lost Book of Enki, he gives us the writings from these lost tablets, and they say that the Anunnaki came here with the intent of mining gold.
And we'll talk about their reasons why in the next episode.
But they discovered they needed some help.
So that is why humans were created.
Yeah, but we're going to read about the cause and effect situations these earthlings had on the Anunnaki. I mean, even though they were created for a distinct purpose, how could anyone, even aliens, not fall in love with us?
And maybe that's exactly what happened.
And I'll go ahead and say it. Enki is one of the main players in this game that resulted in the creation of Homo sapiens, us.
But if we can just imagine for a second, these experiments would have had significant effects on the Anunnaki.
Imagine you were a scientist, and you create something completely new, and it's alive, and it has emotions and a personality. You're probably going to fall in love with it.
Yeah, and then you're going to decide that you want to make another that's even better, and then another and another after that. And we're all going to learn about this in the podcast when we dive into the writings on these tablets.
Maybe Enki and his team created multiple kinds of earthlings that looked different from each other and had different abilities.
Now, Doesn't that seem like a better explanation than, us all coming from two created beings?
Well, I think it gives us a better explanation, at least, than just being told that we have to believe, this is true. If it is true that we're descendants of a science experiment for mining gold, and this experiment, created different kinds of our species, well, then we're able to think about how the different species of humans ended up in different places and how they ended up having different physical traits.
And in the book Sapiens, Harari wrote that there were different types of humans and that we all existed here on Earth. Maybe not at the exact same time,
but at least overlapping times where we all, could have inhabited the Earth together.
Exactly. Just think about it. We have proof that other humanoids, different species of humans than us, existed on Earth. We have Australopithecus, right? And Lucy.
And then there's the Neanderthals. Which some people, maybe all of us, have Neanderthal DNA.
So, we know they were similar to us and that they were actually here.
And even other species of humans have been discovered, like the dwarf species.
And even more recently, in 2010, a single finger bone was found in Siberia, belonging to a previously unknown human species that's now being referred to as the Denisovinians.
But what happened to our cousins? Did we kill them off?
Or did something else happen?
So this is where things are going to get interesting in the book. If the Anunnaki were creating human species to mine gold, why did they keep creating different kinds of humans? Were some species capable of doing things others weren't? Is that why the Anunnaki started infusing their DNA into humans?
And if these accounts are true, is this why we put such great value on gold to this very day? Was it because, we were created with the idea that it was so valuable?
Right.
And did that create conflict with other members of the Anunnaki? The ones that did not agree with this science experiment at all? And that, creates even more questions.
And these stories are a different account of what happened in the Bible. Was there a Garden of Eden? If so, where was it and why haven't we found it? Could the discovery of Göbekli Tepe be the lost Garden of Eden? Did we actually find it?
Well, I think this book does help give a different view on some, very age-old questions. And we all know the story, of creation with Adam and Eve. So if the Anunnaki were creating different human species, why are Adam and Eve so important?
Well, maybe they weren't the first humans, and certainly not the only humans. But maybe the scientists that created them discovered something entirely different in them than the other human species.
And if the creation of Earthlings did cause conflict among the Anunnaki, what could they have done about it? Would they have been willing to completely kill off some or even all of the human species? Is that what happened to our ancient cousins? I mean, could that have, caused such tension between the Anunnaki that they went to war with each other? And what in the world, would have resulted from that?
This is where Sitchin talks about the secrets of the gods being revealed, at least partly, in epic tales like the Epic of Gilgamesh. And this is where we hear more about the debate that led to the Great Deluge.
Yeah, this is how the Anunnaki decided to let mankind perish. But then, why are we still here? Why are we here talking right now, dude? Could the story of Noah and the Ark, from the Bible be true? Would the Anunnaki have really wanted every animal, 2 by 2 to be led on this giant boat to survive the deluge?
That would have been one giant-ass boat, right?
Right.
But what if each species wasn't brought onto a boat? What if it was just the DNA of the different species?
That does seem to make a lot more sense, right? But if members of the Anunnaki wanted the humans to perish, why were we saved? And who was responsible for that?
I would imagine that this act of treachery would have caused, even more problems for this seemingly controversial issue. The Lost Book of Enki is going to help us see a different side of tales. And as we've talked about in other podcasts, there's always more than one side to every story.
And Jericho, I just want you to think about this just for a second. We would have never realized anything other than what we've been taught, right? Had these lost books never been discovered.
That's very true. There's countless generations before us that never heard these words. And just like the Book of Secrets of Thoth, the Book of Wars of Yahweh, and the Book of Righteousness.
Well, sometimes these books are lost or hidden for a very specific reason.
And sometimes they're destroyed. Like in the famed Library of Alexandria in Egypt. It was believed that over 500,000 writings were housed in that library, and it was burnt down.
But why? Why keep these important records hidden for future generations to discover?
Well, are we not ready to handle the information in these writings? But why destroy them? Was the knowledge too powerful, or is it something else?
Maybe the knowledge is too powerful, but it could be a number of different things.
But from these lost books, we gain so many more visions of what may have actually happened throughout the history of human civilization.
And the Book of Enki is just one of many that gives us a much better understanding or theory of how we actually came to be, the reasons we were created, and the thoughts and actions of other beings during the beginning of our time.
Yeah, and we learned that a priest of Marduk had access to clay tablets that tell the history of gods and men that began thousands of years before the deluge.
And when these gods came to Earth, and how the first leader of these gods, the one who gave mankind civilization, came dressed as a fish and waded ashore from the sea.
These texts render accounts of a time when gods reigned on Earth alone. And the Book of Enki not only recreates these stories, but it also tells us why they came here in the first place.
So, we have all these ancient texts, writings of stories that happened so long ago, and they all seem to tell us the same things, but from different perspectives.
And we also know that each of these texts all came from sources from much earlier writings. And one that was a key witness to these events was this leader that splashed down from the heavens named Enki.
But this whole Earth mission was taken away from him and given to his brother Enlil. And Enki was basically demoted, to authority over the supervision of mining gold.
It was Enki that came to the realization that more manpower was needed in the mining, and used the hominoids that inhabited the regions where they were working to create a new hybrid to work in the mines.
And these hybrids were humans.
And this is where the Book of Enki gives us a version of the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden that we had not previously known. How Enki fell in love with his new creation, and how he defended them when his brother Enlil wanted to wipe out our entire species in the Great Deluge.
And Enki was instrumental in sharing certain aspects of advanced knowledge with mankind. These were the secrets of the gods. And these secrets were written down and considered some of the earliest lost texts,
while others were used as the prototype for the biblical stories.
And the Lost Book of Enki is also going to give us some insights to what was happening on Earth, while these gods were here.
Why they made the decisions they made, how outcomes of those decisions affected mankind, and how they came to believe philosophically what was destined and could not have been avoided, and what was just fated as consequences of right or wrong decisions and free will.
And if the planetary orbit is cyclical, if what shall again be, the first things shall also be the last.
If the events in the Lost Book of Enki sharpened soul-searching among the leaders of the Anunnaki and raised the need to explain to the devastated human masses why it came to pass, was it destiny or result of an Anunnaki-made fate?
And the Lost Book of Enki are these accounts. They are stretched over 14 tablets that were discovered in the library of Nippur.
Well, Enki was the first to come, and an eyewitness to all accounts. He was the one who needed to tell the past so the future could be divined. These texts include aspects of the epic creation, descriptions of the fashioning of Adam, and how other Anunnaki came to Enki to obtain a kind of data disk that encoded all aspects of civilization.
And texts of Enki's private life and personal problems, and the unforeseen consequences of his actions.
Sumerian and Akkadian tablets, Babylonian and Assyrian libraries, Egyptian, Hittite, and Canaanite myths, and biblical narratives are the main bodies of the written down memories of the affairs of gods and men. These dispersed and fragmented materials were assembled and used by Sitchin to recreate the eyewitness accounts of Enki, to tell the story of the Anunnaki and the humans on Earth.
So, in dealing with the past, Enki himself perceived the future. The notion that the Anunnaki, exercising free will, were masters of their own fates as well as the fate of humankind.
And this gives way, in the end, to a realization that it was destiny that, when all was said and done, determined the course of events.
And as the Hebrew prophets recognized, the first things shall be the last things.
So, the record of these events, given to us by Enki, becomes the foundation for prophecy, and the past becomes the future. Well, that's all for this episode.
Keep your eyes open for the next episode of the Lost Book of Enki, Memoirs and Prophecies of an Extraterrestrial God, as we go over and dissect each of the tablets, the meanings behind them, and talk about the life and times of the Anunnaki and the beginning of human civilization.
All right, well, we'll see you all next time. I hope you enjoyed the show as much as we did. Remember to check out our website, JerichoExperiment.com. Go ahead and sign up for our email list so we can keep you up to date with our podcast, newsletter, and you can win some really cool prizes. Be sure to hit that like button and subscribe.